from James Whitehead. And incidentally, there is much more information than we were able to share there about him. And we also now go to another one who is John H. Carter, Senior. And we didn't know of him before.
Yeah, we didn't know about him. He was with the original church for a long time. He became high priest of the original church in 1841. He was baptized in 1834 there, and he was with Joseph Smith Jr. to the death in 1841. So who was he? Once again, he was mostly unknown throughout the Restoration. But it's of paramount importance to the Restoration. Again, he's a very clear, credible witness to the truth, and we'll learn what happened and his explanation as we go through. As I said, he was baptised in the original church in 1834 and was ordained to the office of elder in Hancock County, Illinois in 1841. He was then put on the High Council and ordained a high priest later in 1841.
This is important.
Yeah. Now, he was with the Utah branch of the church from 1844 to 1885, which is interesting because he stayed with the Brighamites as they went to Utah all the way through to 1885 until he joined the reorganised church around 1885, 1886. So that's quite interesting. So he saw the other side of what was going on. And
it brings a balance to the testimony of these particular people.
So here's him on page 179 of this court test, the TLCC abstract document, and he's being sworn in there. But we'll just highlight these things out of that there.
Okay, right. I was a member of the church at the time Joseph Smith was killed, and I was there when Brigham Young took the lead. I was in the meeting when he was nominated and voted in, and so on up until his death, the death of Brigham Young. I was acquainted with the doctrines, tenets, and principles of the church under Brigham Young from 1846 up until the time of his death.
Right, okay, so this is the next page. For I lived here in Utah all the time since 1850 and most of the time in Provo, and I've heard Brigham Young preach there often. Some of the doctrines that Brigham Young taught were the same as the doctrines and teachings of the original church, and some of the doctrines that Brigham Young taught I never heard taught by Joseph Smith. Some of the doctrines taught by Brigham Young were the same, as the doctrine taught by Joseph Smith in the original church, and there are some doctrines or teachings taught by Brigham Young or advanced by him and taught and practiced that I never heard taught by Joseph Smith and never knew him to practice them either. Some of these doctrines that were taught by Brigham Young were never taught in the original church prior to 1844, and if any man had taught them, he would have been disfellowshipped from the church very quick. That is, up to 1844 at the time Joseph and Hiram Smith were killed. The polygamy doctrine was never taught in the church in the early days up to 1844. I lived most 2 years with Joseph Smith in one place, and I have heard him preach and the rest of the elders, Hiram Smith and Oliver Cowdery and the rest of them, but I never heard the doctrine of polygamy taught by Joseph or any of them, never in the world. Okay.
I was present at a meeting in the city of Nauvoo in the state of Illinois, at which something was said or done about the successor of Joseph Smith. It was held in the Bowery, right north of the temple, and Joseph Smith was on the stand. I cannot tell you when it was, but it was not long before he was killed. This happened in Nauvoo, in the Bowery that was erected right north of the temple, where they held meetings before the temple was finished. Yes, sir, Joseph Smith, who was called Junior, was on the stand. It was on a Sunday. There was a congregation gathered on that occasion, and it was a large gathering. It was the people mostly from Nauvoo who had gathered there, and when they got together on these occasions, there was a large gathering. The occasion of the gathering was a Sunday service. The Sunday services were held on Sunday. It was a Sunday preaching service, and Joseph Smith occupied the time in the forenoon. I don't recall or recollect who did speak in the afternoon. Joseph Smith spoke from the platform in the forenoon. In the forenoon, I think Sidney Rigdon was there. I think Hiram Smith was there, William Smith. There was a good large number of authorities there of the 12, and I guess Parley Pratt was there too. I don't think anything was said about his successorship there at that time, afternoon, that is, using the word successor. Joseph Smith came to the stand leading his son, young Joseph, and they set him down on a bench at the prophet's right hand. Joseph got up and began to preach and talk to the people, and the question was the question he said was asked by somebody, if Joseph Smith should be killed or die, who would be his successor? And he turned around and pointing to his son, there is the successor. And he went on and said, my work is pretty well known. And that is about all he said in regard to his son. He said in answer to a question that was asked as to who should be his successor in case he should be killed or die, and he pointed to his son, young Joseph, who was sitting there at his side, and said there is your leader. Okay.
I'll just make note there that he said, my work is pretty nearly done. Now, this is quite interesting because does that mean Joseph may have known that his time was short? The Lord may have given him a bit of a hint that his work was pretty nearly done. So that's
just to
quite
note
interesting.
that.
Yeah, just to note that.
If someone later down the track can read this word for word, you'll get a very clear picture of what was happening even at that meeting.
I'll just read this last bit here. My father-in-law was with me at the time and sat there and heard what was said.
Don't forget, this is John H. Carter.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and when they were going home, my father-in-law asked, what does that mean? He said, that has got a meaning to it, from the way Joseph Smith talked and pointed to his son, because Joseph had said, there is your leader, pointing at the time to his son. And his father-in-law said, well, we will see the fulfillment of that by and by. Okay. It was the understanding of the people generally of the church, as far as I know, all understood it from that day. And on that, when the boy Joseph came of age, he would take the lead in the church and be its head. There were a great many people who believed that, and moreover, President Young preached it himself for some time after he came into the valley. That was the belief of hundreds and thousands, that the belief then and is the belief now. I have always believed that ever since I heard Joseph say the words I have stated, ever since I saw his father point him out, and I believe it today just as strongly as I ever did. And it was under that belief that I have followed President Young west with the branch of the church known as the Salt Lake branch. That was the teaching and the ideas held out by the officers and elders, including Brigham Young and other prominent elders of the church who afterwards came west and located here at Salt Lake City. And it was the teaching in Utah Territory for several years after the death of Joseph Smith. Here in Salt Lake City, they publicly taught and held out the idea to members of the church that Joseph Smith, the son of Joseph Smith Jr., would eventually be the president of the church. Not one half of the members would have followed Brigham Young west or would have followed his leadership if it had not been published at the time and advised by the authorities of the church that young Joseph Smith would eventually be the leader of the church. If that had not been told to the members, there would not have been one half to follow them who did in fact follow them. The doctrine, teaching and tenets of the church from 1834, at the time I became a member of the original church down to 1844, are found in the book of Doctrine and Covenants. Take out the revelation on polygamy and you may take the balance. Polygamy was not taught from 1830 to 1844. I mean, polygamy was not taught from 1830 down to 1834 and then down to 1844. I never heard Joseph Smith teach it either publicly or privately. But about the time Brigham Young took the lead in the church, it was taught privately. It was not taught publicly or in any books or in any of the publications or papers of the church, nor in the revelations that. Yeah.
Okay. The revelation known as the revelation on polygamy, or the purported polygamous revelation, was never published in any of the books containing the doctrines and tenets of the church prior to 1844. And we'll go down a bit. I think the revelation on polygamy was presented to the church in 1852. That is the revelation that made the people to the people and forced upon them. The Book of Doctrine and Covenants, published prior to 1852, did not contain the revelation on polygamy. That was put in since 1852. Brigham Young and its principles are different from the doctrines and principles of the church from 1834 to 1844. They differed. I was present when Brigham Young was chosen or nominated president. There was a vote taken on that occasion. I don't know whether the privilege was given for the negative vote or not, but I can tell you who appointed him or who moved his appointment. It was Orson Hyde who made the motion and that he is elected as president, and that was done at Cainesville in the log schoolhouse. Orson Hyde made the motion and Brother Woodruff seconded the motion, and it was put to a vote and carried. There were about 200 there, I suppose. It was at a conference appointed by Brigham Young and the 12 to be held there. Yep. Yeah, if you could.
Yep. And it was 2 weeks from the time that they had the big dance and the feast, and the people turned out and cut their logs and raised and built this log house. And they appointed this conference, and Brigham Young and the 12, and the people came together, and there was Brother Brigham, Brother Kimball, and Brother Hyde. And I think there were several of the 12 there at the time. Brother Woodruff was there also. Brother Brigham, then when they got together, told them there was some business to be transacted at the conference, and he told them what it was. And then Orson Hyde moved that Brother Brigham should be our president, and Brother Woodruff seconded the motion, and it was carried. I do not think it was the church that voted on him and elected him president, for the church at the time numbered somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 of people in the church. That was. And there were only about 200 present at the time Brigham Young was elected president. And it was just what I called a common meeting, hardly that. It was called a conference appointed by Brigham Young and the 12 that were there, and the church at large didn't know anything about it at the time. That's interesting.
Yes. Okay. Yes, sir. I said that polygamy was not taught in the time of Joseph Smith, and that is exactly what I said. Yes, sir. I said it was not publicly taught, not by Joseph Smith, nor Hiram Smith, not while they lived. At least I never heard them teach it. I know men that were cut off from the church for teaching it at that time, and I lived in Nauvoo for quite a while. I have stated repeatedly that polygamy was not publicly taught during Joseph Smith's lifetime. I think it was taught privately by some of the members and practiced secretly by some. I knew of 2 or 3 there, and I could tell you who they were and their names if you want them. Okay. Yes, sir, I said in my direct examination that there were some doctrines taught by Brigham Young after the death of Joseph Smith that were not taught before that time, and I say it now. The doctrine of polygamy was not taught by Joseph Smith, never in the world, and I say that as a fact. If he did, I never heard him, and I never heard it, and I don't believe he could have done so without my hearing it. I was 2 years in Kirtland, about the same type place where he was, and I went to Missouri, and from Missouri back to Illinois. and was there up until the time of his death. I never heard him teach such a doctrine, but I heard him denounce it, for I have known a man in Wisconsin who taught it. Right, I'm a member of the reorganized church. I was a member of the church here in Utah. I was baptized in 1834 in the state of Maine, and I was baptized in the reorganized church about 7 or 8 years ago. I left the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints here in Utah 7 or 8 years ago. I became dissatisfied with their doctrine and teachings and left them and joined the reorganized church.
Okay, so this is a reading from Doctrine and Covenants, which was available at the time in 1829, April 1829, section 6. And if thou wilt inquire, and thou shalt know the mysteries which are great and marvellous, therefore thou shalt exercise thy gift, that thou mayst find out mysteries, that thou mayst bring many of them to the knowledge of truth, yea, convince them of the error of their ways. Okay.
We go now to William B. Smith.
Oh, it's William B. Yeah.
Yep.
So this is Joseph Smith's brother, William B. Smith. Not many people may know. He's not talked about that much in the Restoration, or we hadn't heard of him that much, but others may know of him. And he was Joseph Smith's brother and was alive at the time when all this was going on as well. And this is from the history of the RLDS Church. In 1879, he made a statement here, an article.
Yep.
And it was in the Saints Herald.
Okay. In the Saints Herald, January 1, 1879, there appeared an article from the pen of Elder William B. Smith, brother of Joseph Smith the martyr, from which, we quote, after speaking to the people in Utah denying the divinity of Christ and substituting the Adam God theory, he states, Joseph Smith, to my personal knowledge, never taught any such doctrine. While reading over a few lines of that forged revelation on the wife doctrine, I thought it singularly strange that your father could have given utterance to such ideas of blood and murder, when in all his lifetime his example and teachings were contrary or reverse to such teachings. No man, from my personal knowledge, was more devoted to his wife and children than Joseph Smith, nor could he be for one single moment have penned a law or given utterance to a rule that would, under any circumstances whatsoever, deprive them of life. Nor did Joseph Smith ever predict that the time would come that it would be lawful to murder apostates or to destroy rebellious women because they refused to become polygamous wives, or to submit to such rules of barbarianism. Anyone acquainted with the real character of Joseph Smith on the subject of family relation would know at first glance that the monster revelation was a forgery and a fraud of the blackest dye, palmed off on the name and character of the prophet. Twice in my history, I've journeyed with my brother Joseph as his lifeguard. He went to the camp of the saints.
And once in the company of your uncle Hiram, Vincent Knight and Elder Rigdon, and up to only a few days previous to his death, I was in close counsel, more or less, with your father, and never in all this familiar association with him did I ever hear him hint or say that he had received a polygamous revelation. And from these and other facts that I might name, I pronounce that the polygamous revelation a base of wicked forgery, the intent of which, like the oaths and covenants that apostates administer in their humbug endowments, was to better enable these usurpers and conspirators to sustain themselves in their apostasy and ill-gotten power.
Yeah.
Okay, now this is now from the Temple Lock court case from William B, where he was sworn in once again on the stand.
Yeah, isn't it interesting that all these people were able to recall, even though it's years later, to the fact that they were there and knew all the events that were happening in Nauvoo, and
I've got a comment or a question.
yeah. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
Go
we've
ahead.
got a comment or a question there. We can hear someone there.
Yeah, a question. Yeah, Brother Ian. Because Doctrine and Covenants 132 in the LDS, when I first read it, there was part of it, verses 15 and 16, which made sense of Matthew 22. Matthew 22 says, at the resurrection, people will neither marry or be given in marriage. They will be like the angels in heaven. And that's what I call the basic Christians and the non-Mormons. They all quote that. But this Doctrine and Covenants 132, verse 15 and 16 sort of gives more depth to that, helps to understand it. It's only, it says 15 and 16, therefore if a man marry him a wife in the world, and he marry her not by me or by my word, and then it means then out of the world they will neither marry nor given in marriage, but appointed angels in heaven. So that Matthew 22 is only telling part of the story. And it was in Doctrine and Covenants 132, verses 15 and 16. That seemed to make a lot of sense of that to me.
Right.
So yeah, I'd like to clear up whether that's part of the forged part or not. So yeah. I just need to clear that up. That's my question. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ian. Yes. And it's a topic that's created a lot of uneasiness over the years anyway, because of the different things that were said in that revelation. Anyway, thank you. Any other comments?
No.
Okay, right. There were 3 or 4 propositions of doctrines that were introduced into the church after the death of my brother on June 1844, under the counsel of a part of the 12. One point was, and it had never been taught previous to that time, was that Adam was God and that Moses was a man God. Another doctrine was that of blood atonement, meaning that if a man disobeyed the propositions of that council, meaning that the remaining 12, he had to pay for it by the forfeiture of his life and to atone for the sin by the shedding of his own blood, or allowing it to be shed by others. That was blood atonement for you, and it had never been taught in the old church, nor had the Adam God doctrine ever been taught in the old church. So they brought that matter down to Adam God doctrine and the Moses God doctrine. And finally, these men were left or composed to the 12 that time brought in Joseph Smith as another God, one of their gods under the Adam God doctrine of blood atonement. Wow.
Question there.
Yeah, okay.
Is there a comment or a question?
That one?
Yeah, this is Fred. I've got a quick comment or question. In your research, have you encountered people who, when they talk, they cover up polygamy by calling, or let's see, I didn't say it right. That they cover up their way of thinking about polygamy by calling it spiritual wifery or celestial marriage.
Yes, that is in here. Yep.
In other words,
you'll probably.
Let me finish this. So, in other words, the ones that are in favor of it only ever refer to it as spiritual, celestial marriage. The ones that are against it are the ones that use the word polygamy. So anyway, by using the word polygamy, it gives them deniability that they go, I never heard about polygamy. I never heard that a bit. Well, that's because it was called celestial marriage. So anyway, do you have a comment about that?
Yes, yeah, there is some other people that do comment on that. I think in the early part, Lorenzo Snow and especially Lorenzo Snow
and
would have mentioned about that. But there's some more coming on the spiritual wifery thing because there's a comment that was put in Times and Seasons, which you'll see soon, where the Ladies Relief Society and also the 12 at the time gave a comment about the secret wife system or the spiritual celestial.
And some of that, though, was linked to, we feel after reading all the information that it probably had its secret and backroom situations when John C. Bennett was in Nauvoo, and that some of them must have been alerted to what he was trying to preach and or bring among them. But that's another one that is coming later, and it looks like we may be running out of time a lot. But Fred, thank you for your comments there. You'll see more of this unfold as it comes through. And if everybody were to be able to get this document themselves and read, there's a lot of little bits that we have not got time to include, and would answer all those troubles. Okay.
So, do you want to continue?
Yeah, okay. Another point was a marriage question in regard to the plurality of wives that was taught after the death of Joseph and Hiram, my brothers. These new doctrines that I spoke of were caused, well, what caused the separation between me and the body of people, and neither of them were taught previous to 1844 nor for some time after 1844. The branch of the Mormon Church did teach these doctrines, is what they call the Utah Mormons. I was well acquainted with the doctrines of the original church from 1830 to 1844. That is, the doctrines that were taught in the church. Okay. I never, prior to the death of my brother or subsequent to his death, taught or preached the doctrine of polygamy. I never did at any time or at any place preach the doctrine of polygamy, and any history that states that I did teach the doctrine of polygamy, if he does state it, it is false. Okay.
Yep.
Right.
I left Nauvoo in 1845 because my life was in danger if I remained there, because of my objections and protests against the doctrine of blood atonement and other new doctrines that were being brought into the church. After I left, I published an account of my separation from the church and the causes which led up to it. I think it occupied 16 pages. It gave the cause of my separation from the church and contained a statement of the apostasy of the leaders of the church at Nauvoo. You can read on that.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. Now, this here, according to the elders that had not practiced polygamy as late as August 29th, 1852, this is evidently false, but it establishes the unreliability of the witness and kills the effective statement that it was practiced in the days of Joseph Smith. Elder Young, in an interview with Senator Trumbull, as reported in the Alta Californian, stated that polygamy was introduced after they settled in Utah. Senator Trumbull, can you depend upon a fair hearing in Congress? And Brigham Young, what? Take our papers and throw them under the table. Send more. Under the table they go. This was said with energetic gesticularization as to our institutions that we know we are right, and polygamy, which you object to, was not originally a part of our system, but was adopted by us as a necessity after we came here. And that's from the True Latter-day Saints Herald, Volume 16, page 158. This is an interview with William W. Blair, published the following interview with Elder William B. Smith, brother of the prophet and one of the 12 at Joseph Smith's death.
That Joseph the seer was not the author of the endowment given either at Boree, Nauvoo, nor in Utah may be further seen by the following questions by the writer in July last, and the answers by W.B. Smith, the only surviving brother of the seer and one of the quorum of 12 at his death.
Okay. Did Joseph Smith the seer teach or give endowment at Nauvoo or elsewhere, the same or similar to what to that given of the Brighamites?
My answer is he did not.
Did Joseph Smith, the seer, teach or sanction in the church affairs the giving of secret oaths, covenants, signs, grips, passwords, etc.?
My answer is he did not.
Did Joseph the seer teach that the 12 or any of one of them should lead the church after his death?
My answer is he did not.
Did Joseph the seer teach that the priesthood was superior to the law of the church when revealed the word of God?
My answer is he did not.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry. Joseph's teaching always was that the law was his supreme rule of the church and that all other powers were in subjection to the law and the books.
Did Joseph the seer teach that polygamy was essential to salvation and a fullness of glory?
My answer is Joseph taught no polygamy, not to my knowledge.
Did Joseph the seer teach that by the will of God, the saints would be gathered to the Rocky Mountains?
My answer is he did not, for at the last general conference held in Nauvoo in the spring of 1844, Joseph's teaching was that the next great work to be accomplished after the completion of the temple would be to divide the United States into districts in which to build up church, charging the ministry with special care to this work. Yep.
Okay. Elmer, this is a reading from Elmer. Behold, they were in the midst of darkness. Nevertheless, their souls were illuminated by the light of the everlasting word. Okay, we've got another.
Right.
We're going to hear from John C. Bennett and what kind of person he was here. And this is quite interesting. And this will give a lot of detail about who he was. Yep. Okay. Yeah, here we go.
Smith.
Okay. Oh, I'll just go back. I'll just current slide. There we go.
Here we are, John Bennett.
Yep. Do you want to read that?
Okay. Now, about this time, General J.C. Bennett, Quartermaster General in the state of Illinois, began a series of letters of a friendly and complimentary character, which he finally resulted in his uniting with the church. He became quite prominent as an officer in the Nauvoo Legion and as mayor of the city, but he held no high position of trust in the church. He afterward became disaffected and was expelled from the church, and in 1842 he published a book entitled Mormonism Exposed. By the church, he was accused of gross immorality, and by the way he of retaliation, accused the leaders of the church with serious wrongdoing. A minute tracing of his career would be unprofitable, nor is he, according to his own testimony, worthy of it. Whatever wrong or error, if any, may be seen or committed by Joseph Smith or his colleagues, the evidence of it must rest upon the testimony of that of Mr. Bennett. When a man, other than the testimony of Mr. Bennett, whereas a man confesses, Mr. Bennett did, at least at one time in his lifetime, he said that he was a hypocrite and a liar. Fair-minded men will discard his testimony, whether favourable in their own views or not. Mr. Bennett has this to say of himself. At length, it occurred to me that the surest and speediest way to overthrow the impostor and to expose his iniquity to the world would be to profess myself as a convert to his doctrine and join him at the seat of his dominion. I felt confident that from my standing in society and the offices I held in the state of Illinois, that I should be received by the Mormons with open arms, and the course I was resolved to pursue would enable me to get behind the curtain and behold at my leisure the secret wires of the fabric, likewise these, or those rather, who moved them. And that was part of his book. Okay.
Now, that was just said earlier.
Okay.
So now, Joseph Smith Jr. Had some dealing with John C. Bennett, or Dr. John C. Bennett, as some call him, because he was a physician. He actually had to expel him from the church, or excommunicate him at the time for his dealings. And this is what Joseph Smith had to say about him.
Right.
And this is from History of the Church, Volume 2, page 589.
And after I had done all in my power to persuade him to amend his conduct, and all these facts were fully established, not only by testimony, but by his own concessions, he, having acknowledged that they were true, and seeing no prospect of any satisfaction from his future life, the hand of fellowship was withdrawn from him as a member of the church. By the officers, but on account of his earnestly requesting that we would not publish him to the world, we concluded not to do so at that time, but would let the matter rest until we saw the effect of what we had already done. It appears evident that as soon as he perceived that he could no longer maintain his standing as a member of the church, nor his respectability as a citizen, he came to the conclusion to leave the place, which he has done, and that very abruptly. And he had done so quietly, had he done so quietly, and not attempted to deceive the people around him, his case would not have excited the indignation of the citizens so much as his real conduct has done. In order to make his case look plausible, he reported that he had withdrawn from the church because we were not worthy of his society. Thus, instead of manifesting the spirit of repentance, he has to the last proved himself to be unworthy of the confidence or regard of any upright person by lying to deceive the innocent, and committed adultery in the most abominable and degraded manner.
I'll read this.
Okay.
We are credibly informed that he has colleagued with some of his former wicked persecutors, the Missourians, and has threatened destruction upon us. But we should naturally suppose that he would be so much ashamed of himself at the inquiry he had already done to those who never injured but befriended him in every possible manner, that he could never dare lift up his head before an enlightened public with the design either to misrepresent or persecute. But be that as it may, we neither dread him nor his influence, but this we much believe, that unless he is determined to fill up the measure of his iniquity and bring sudden destruction upon himself from the hand of the Almighty, he will be silent and never more attempt to injure those concerning who he has testified upon oath he knows nothing but that which is good and virtuous. Thus I have laid before the Church of Latter-day Saints, and therefore the public, the character and conduct of a man who has stood high in the estimation of many, but from the foregoing facts it will be seen that he is not entitled to any credit, but rather to be stamped with indignity and here we go, and disgrace, so far as he may be known. For I have stated I am prepared to prove having all the documents concerning the matter in my possession, but I think to say further is unnecessary, as to the subject is so plain that no one can mistake the true nature of the case. I remain respectfully yours, Joseph Smith.
Yeah.
Now, he was caught in the act of polygamy at that time in Nauvoo. We've done some other research on that.
Yeah, secret wife system and all sorts of...
It's where it began.
Yep.
Basically.
But anyway, the history, there's lots more on John Cook Bennett, and you probably at some time in the future need
do your own research.
further.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Okay, I've got a reading from Jacob here in the Book of Mormon. For behold, thus saith the Lord, this people begin to wax in iniquity. They understand not the scriptures, for they seek to excuse themselves in committing whoredoms because of the things which were written concerning David and Solomon his son. Behold, David and Solomon truly had many wives and concubines, which thing was abominable before me, saith the Lord. Wherefore, thus saith the Lord, I have led this people forth out of the land of Jerusalem by the power of mine arm, that I might raise up unto me a righteous branch from the fruit of the loins of Joseph. Wherefore, I, the Lord God, will not suffer that this people shall do like unto them of old. Wherefore, my brethren, hear me, and hearken unto the word of the Lord. For there shall not be any man among you, save it be of one wife, and concubines he shall have none. For I, the Lord God, delight in the chastity of women, and whoredoms are an abomination before me, thus saith the Lord of hosts. From Jacob in the Book of Mormon there.
Thank you.
And Doctrine and Covenants reading here from section 6, April 1829. Behold, thou knowest that thou hast inquired of me, and I did enlighten thy mind. And now I tell these things, that thou may knowest that thou hast been enlightened by the Spirit of truth. Yea, I tell thee that thou knowest that there is none else save God, that knowest thy thoughts and intents of thy heart. I tell these things as a witness unto thee, that the words or the work which hast been writing are true. Therefore be diligent, stand by my servant Joseph, faithfully in whatsoever difficult circumstances he may be for the word's sake.
Okay. Now, I'm just wondering whether I can change the little order of things here and go to
okay.
Emma next.
Oh, you want Emma?
Yes,
Okay.
if that's okay.
Yep.
We're running light on time,
Yep.
and
Joseph Smith III is a good one too, but
we'll go to yep. But if we could go to Emma, because I feel at this time her testimony is of substantial importance. Okay. She on our sheet number 8 here.
Okay. So this is Emma Hale Smith Biderman. Yeah.
And the reason that I wanted to include Emma to make sure that whilst we have our folks on this particular occasion sharing in the information that was certainly gathered mostly by the court case in the Temple Lot of 1893, when those that we've already heard, and there are more, by the way, that we will have perhaps not the time to do. But anyway, Emma, she was Joseph Smith Jr.'s wife. And what about her knowledge of all of this that was so supposed to have been happening in the family? And we've heard all of the situations when, those that were supposedly joined to Joseph Smith Jr. Anyway, let's go to her testimony. This is Jason W. Briggs talking to Mrs. Biderman
Which is Emma Smith.
and asking this question. Mrs. Biderman, have you seen the revelation on polygamy published by Orson Pratt in the Seer in 1852?
She says, I have.
Yep. Have you read it?
I have read it and heard it read.
What did you ever see, or did you ever see that document in manuscript previous to its publication by Pratt?
I never did.
Did you ever see any document of that kind purporting to be a revelation to authorize polygamy?
No, I never did.
Did Joseph Smith ever teach you the principles of polygamy as being revealed to him, or a correct and right as a righteous principle? Sorry,
correct and righteous principle.
Yep. Okay.
He never did.
What about that statement of Brigham Young that you burnt the original manuscript of that revelation?
It is false in all its parts, made out of whole cloth, without any foundation in truth. Now, this is reading afterwards. It says by the Briggs. This will be by Briggs here. This certainly stamps the most circumstantial fact alleged in the support of the geniuses of that
Genuineness.
genuineness of that document as a base fraud, in keeping with the document itself. False facts are usually alleged to support false theories. Thus, at every step in the investigation of this subject, proof develops how unattainable is the position,
Yeah.
untenable is the position assumed for polygamy, both in its alleged facts, its principles, and its fruits. And that's from the Messenger, Volume 1, page 23. Okay. And we've got a reading here from Doctrine and Covenants, section 42. Thou shalt love thy wife with all thy heart, and shalt cleave unto her and no one else. And he that look uponeth a woman and to lust after her shall deny the faith, and shall not have the Spirit. And if he repents not, he shall be cast out. Thou shalt not commit adultery, and he that committeth adultery and repenteth not shall be cast out. And that was a revelation given on February the 9th, 1831. So this is the last testimony of Emma here.
Yeah, this is an interview.
No, it's not. This is her testimony.
Okay, right.
Yep. So have you got that there too?
Okay, yep. Emma Smith.
Yeah,
Yep.
and it's down from our file.
Okay.
Here, from here.
Okay, our thought was that if we had lacked courage to ask her because we feared the answers she might give, that we would put aside our fear and whatever the worst might be, we would hear it. The result is given below, it having been decided to give the statements to the readers of the Herald in view of the death of Sister Emma having occurred so soon after she made them, thus giving the character of her last testimony. It is intended to incorporate these quotations and answers in forthcoming history of the reorganisation. We apologise to our mother, this is Joseph Smith III, and probably other members of the family there, for putting questions respecting polygamy and plural wives as we felt we ought to do so. Question: who performed the marriage ceremony for Joseph Smith and Emma Hale? When and where? And the answer: I was married in the South Bainbridge, New York, at the house of Squire Tarbell by him when I was in my 22nd or 23rd year.
Now go over here.
Right, okay.
What about? Yep, here.
What about the revelation on polygamy? Did Joseph Smith have anything like it? What of spiritual wifery? Answer: there was no revelation on either polygamy or spiritual wives. There was some rumours of some sort, of which I asked my husband. He assured me that all of it, that all there was of it was that a chat between about plural wives, he had said. Such a system might possibly be if everybody was agreed to it and would behave as they should, but they would not. And besides, it was contrary to the will of heaven. No such thing as polygamy or spiritual wifery was taught publicly or privately before my husband's death, and that I have or ever had knowledge of. Did he have other wives than yourself? He had no other wife but me, nor did he, to my knowledge, ever have.
Okay. So it goes on here. Question: what about the revelation on polygamy? Did Joseph Smith have anything like it? What of spiritual wifery? There was no revelation either on polygamy or spiritual wives. There were some rumours of something of the sort which I had asked my husband. He assured me that all of it was of it, and that in a chat about plural wives, he had said, well, such a system might possibly be if everyone was agreed to it. Oh, this is something we've already gone over. Okay.
Okay.
So did he not hold the marital relation with other women than yourself? He did not have improper relations with any woman that ever came to my knowledge. Was there nothing about spiritual wives that you recollect? At one time, my husband came to me and asked me if I'd ever heard certain rumours about spiritual marriages or anything of the kind, and assured me that if I had that they were without foundation, that there was no such doctrine and never should be with his knowledge or consent. I know that he had no other wife or wives other than myself in any sense, either spiritual or otherwise. Now, this is from Doctrine and Covenants, section 49. Wherefore it is lawful that he should have one wife, and twain shall be one flesh, and all of that the earth might answer into the end of the creation. Okay, do you want to go on? That was Emma.
Yeah, that was Emma.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot more on Emma, but unfortunately, our time is running very low.
Yep.
We may not be able to conclude.
Just before we
many
go,
more.
though, just
Yep.
before we finish here, was there someone else that someone would like to hear about out of these people?
Who have we left that we haven't heard?
Well, we've got.
I got a quick question.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Fred. Did you ever encounter any testimony from James Whitehead about facilitating a celestial marriage with Emma or anybody else? Did you encounter that?
From James Whitehead.
Yeah, James Whitehead.
We didn't go through all of his stuff. There might be, we took out the main points, but there could be, he could have mentioned spiritual wifery or something in there.
Yeah, I can't remember that one, Brother Fred, but his testimony is very clear. He was really on the ball with everything, so I'd have to look into that one beyond our time together here.
You can download that document from that trial that he gave all that evidence on there as well.
Yep.
There's not a lot of him in church history we discovered.
Yeah. To download that, by the way, there are 500 pages of material from that court case, and they're A4 size. So I imagine there's a lot to go through, and that's why we only could present the bulk of what was said there, because to me it was new testimony. We'd never heard this before, and I had not heard of James Whitehead nor John Carter, and even we have Catherine Salisbury, Joseph Smith's brother, sister. Yeah.
Yep. We have another question there. Was there someone with another question?
Oh, just a quick comment. Because I have sort of an epiphany. What Brigham Young did is like, basically bullying, isn't it? There was a proper order of things to be done, but this is where the LDS became a corporation. This is like classic corporate bullying. You can't have a corporation without this sort of behaviour. This is, I'm familiar with this sort of behaviour in New Zealand. I have an epiphany now. This is why there's only the LDS in New Zealand, because this sort of bullying culture is so prevalent here. So that's why it's a corporation now. Yeah. Thanks.
I think behind it all is Satan, of course. We know that he's the father of all lies, and he was there when these things were happening.
But the sad thing is the continuation of accepting these untruths has resulted in many people losing faith in the work. And that's what my heart has been touched with. And the reason that I wanted to bring out the truths of this, so that it can be in the open then, and realise the spiritual character of Joseph Smith Jr. And I know he didn't do everything in the way in which we would understand it to be done. There were things, but he was a sort of a spiritual man in a frontier time in the USA history, and that was difficult too. So, but Joseph Smith Jr. himself we haven't given his testimony on what he says, but we may not have time for that, Darren.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I'd like to save that for another time if the opportunity ever comes
Joseph
up.
Smith himself answers the question, and actually 1 month exactly before the day he was killed, he gives an excellent discourse on the dissenters in Nauvoo and what was going on at the time, and it's well worth a read.
Yeah, he
but
obviously
he knew that
there was some secret situations going, but they all linked his name to it to gain credibility, and it's obvious that the prophet did not take part in those allegations that everybody has put about him, and it's because my heart sort of is suffering from the loss of my brother and sister from the work, because they believe all of these lies, and that has lost the credibility of the Book of Mormon and many things about the restoration, and the restoration itself. This is the community of Christ have moved on from even the wanting to know much about Joseph Smith Jr. because they would indicate that's a dark part of history. But it should not be. It should be a bright light, and that's just my heart.
Maybe not like what's going on in the USA, but in Australia, the Community of Christ have rejected Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon, and that may be a surprise to others. They don't use it at all. They say that they still have it, but they don't use it at all, and that is sad. So
it's because of the polygamy issue was the greatest reason, and I guess those other dark ones, the atonement thing and Adam God worship, but at least these new witnesses to me were like finding a light in a dark tunnel, and because they are so real when you read them, and you really have to read them to get the spirit of what they were trying to do as well. And it was bringing this into light that I felt it was worthy of the time to spend. We've spent a lot of time, and we realise in the time that we've spent how much we didn't learn about all of these witnesses, these 11 people. But anyway, I'll leave it at that.
There's another comment there.
Yeah, I got it from somewhere that Adam is like Michael, who is the Holy Spirit. Yeah, who is a personage of spirit. Otherwise, he could not dwell in people. I mean, that's the doctrine I go by that I've heard, and it's I don't know what other people think. If anyone can correct, but yeah, that's what I heard. That Adam is the Holy Spirit. I don't know.
I'm not sure on that one, Ian. So perhaps, that's something I can't comment on. I'm not sure there.
There's another comment there, is there?
Yeah, this is Bob. Yeah,
Yes,
I'm not going to comment on what Ian said. I know nothing about that. It's the first I've ever heard of such a thing. I would, anyway, I wanted to comment on, just ask Brother Brian and Darren, did Glenn or Shirley see this presentation?
No, they haven't yet. I was wanting to actually present it to them at a time beyond today, and I wanted to make sure that I had my mind clear, and that it needed to come from my heart rather than just from pages on a screen or pages in a book. So, but Bob, that's yet to take place, and I'll that's something that I've got to prayerfully prepare for.
Yeah, and our prayers are with you, brothers.
Yeah. Thank you, so Brother Bob.
We might end it there. We did have more to present, but Joseph Smith Jr., do your own researches, look into those things.
But download that court case for sure, because it says things in there that some people might not want everybody in the world to see. Okay, so we might.
We'll go back to the screen.
Yep,
I think that's,
we'll
Yep.
conclude our presentation at that point.
Yep.
And thank you for
Sorry it's gone
everybody.
on
And
so
sorry
long.
it was so intense. It was, just that I was excited about it. Here is some new light, and these testimonies were men that were sustained by God in their lives till 1893, and they gave their testimony, and most of them didn't live, much more than the date of the court case. So it was something rather unique. Perhaps we could stop the recording here.